We are unraveling something that is absolutely fascinating and honestly a little horrifying. We're looking at the biological quest for human immortality. We're going to cover the hard science of aging, some truly bizarre historical attempts to cheat the Reaper, and the modern billionaires who are funding the ultimate anti-aging tech. Because it's literally humanity's ultimate question, right? Is it actually possible to cure death? We're going on a pretty incredible journey today, moving from ancient, deadly myths to the actual microscopic reality of how our cells function, how they age, and ultimately how they might just be engineered to live forever. To really grasp where this science is heading, we actually have to rewind a bit to 1951. There was a woman named Henrietta Lacks who went to a hospital with cervical cancer, and without her knowledge or consent, doctors extracted a small piece of her tumor. Now, normally, human cells die within about 24 hours outside the body, but Henrietta's cells, they were different. When doctors checked the microscope the very next day, her cells weren't dying at all, they were actively multiplying. They literally refused to die. These cells, which were later named HeLa cells, became the first immortal human cells ever grown in a lab, and they pretty much sparked the entire modern scientific quest to cure aging. But, this modern breakthrough didn't just happen in a vacuum. It builds on a very long, very deadly historical obsession with living forever. I mean, before modern science, the pursuit of immortality was basically fatal. Emperor Qin of China drank liquid mercury because he thought it was an elixir of life and, well, poisoned himself. Later on in the 9th century, alchemists who were trying to brew a potion for eternal life accidentally invented gunpowder instead. Jump to 1484, and you have Pope Innocent VIII attempting to regain his youth through the first ever human blood transfusions, using blood from 3 young boys. It was a horrific experiment, and it ended in death for everyone involved. And even in 1912, Nobel-winning scientist Alexis Carrel shocked the world by claiming he kept a chicken's heart alive in a jar for 34 years. Turns out, total fraud. He was secretly feeding it fresh stem cells the whole time. So what actually happens when we age? It all comes down to the microscopic level. To keep us alive, our cells are constantly working, and eventually they wear out and die. To replace them, a dying cell makes a copy of itself, which means it also has to copy its DNA, our biological instruction manual. Think of it exactly like photocopying a page from a book. If you take that photocopy and photocopy it again and just keep doing that over and over, eventually the text becomes completely unreadable. And that is exactly what happens to our DNA. It just degrades. Now, this degradation isn't just random bad luck. It's actually a hardwired biological rule. Back in the 1960s, a scientist named Leonard Hayflick discovered what we now call the Hayflick limit. He proved that a normal human cell can only divide and copy itself about 40 to 60 times. After that, it permanently stops dividing. Basically, our cells have a built-in expiration date. And the physical mechanism behind that expiration date is just wild. Think of the protective caps at the end of every strand of your DNA. They're called telomeres, literally just like the plastic caps on the ends of your shoelaces. Every single time a cell copies itself, that telomere gets a little bit shorter. Once the telomere wears away completely, the DNA starts taking direct damage. The body can no longer repair it, and that leads to weakness, disease, and what we all universally experience as old age. Which actually brings us right back to Henrietta Lacks. When you contrast normal cellular death with her HeLa cells, the difference is staggering. Normal cells hit that Hayflick limit because their telomeres shrink, but HeLa cells completely bypass this limit. They had a rare genetic mutation that kept an enzyme called telomerase constantly active. This enzyme continuously rebuilt those protective caps, meaning the cells could divide infinitely without ever degrading. These immortal cells became so crucial to science that they were literally used to test and perfect the life-saving polio vaccine. But here's the thing. Cheating death isn't just about mutated cells in a lab. Our own bodies actually harbor some absolutely mind-blowing regenerative powers. If you were to lose 70% of your liver, your body knows exactly how to rapidly regenerate that missing tissue from just a 30% fragment. It completely regrows. The biological code for extreme healing is already locked inside of us. So that raises a pretty obvious question, right? If we can regrow a massive organ like a liver, why on earth can't we regrow a severed limb like a salamander does? Well, when a salamander loses a limb, it forms a blastema. It's this cluster of incredibly versatile stem cells that seamlessly weave a new arm or limb. Humans can't do this for 2 main reasons. First, we have a biological security guard called the p53 gene. Its whole job is to detect rapid cell division and shut it down immediately to prevent cancer.
Second, our bodies panic when injured and trigger fibrosis. This rapidly throws down thick, strict scar tissue over the wound. That scar acts like an impenetrable wall, and it stops any new delicate cells from building a new limb. But science is actually learning how to hack these exact biological limits. Enter Dr. David Sinclair and what's known as the Benjamin Button effect. Sinclair theorized that our DNA is kind of like a massive switchboard. Some switches, specifically our youthful healing genes, get turned off as we get older. In a really groundbreaking experiment, he successfully reactivated these dormant childhood genes in the eyes of elderly mice. And the result? The damaged cells repaired themselves, and the blind old mice completely regained their vision. He proved that aging can actually run in reverse.
And as you can probably guess, when you prove that aging can literally be reversed, the world's most powerful people start paying attention. $3 billion. That is the staggering amount of money that ultra-rich tech founders, including Amazon's Jeff Bezos, have poured into just one single company, Altos Labs. And they're definitely not the only ones. Founders of the world's leading AI companies are also pouring millions into retro biosciences. They all share one singular, massive goal: to defeat human aging entirely. So what exactly does $3 billion buy you in the anti-aging world? Well, they're exploring avenues that sound straight out of a sci-fi movie. They're trying to artificially extend those telomeres we talked about. They are developing senolytics to purge dead cells. They're using CRISPR to literally cut and paste out aging genes. They're developing 3D bioink to just print you a brand new liver when your old one fails. And they're even researching microscopic nanobots that will patrol through your blood, basically assassinating damaged cells on sight. Let's zoom in on just one of those wild technologies: senolytics. See, over time, some of our cells become what we call senescent. Basically, they become zombie cells. They are way too damaged to actually do their jobs, but they stubbornly refuse to die naturally. Instead, they just wander around the body, getting in the way and secreting chemicals that cause severe inflammation. This is physically why we feel older and achy. So the new senolytic drugs being developed act as targeted assassins. They're specifically designed to hunt down and kill these zombie cells, sweeping out the biological trash so only the healthy cells remain. Now, all of this sounds incredibly promising, sure. But we really need to pivot for a second and ask a crucial, frankly terrifying question. What happens if we actually succeed? What are the biological consequences of forcing our cellular telomeres to stay long so we can live forever? Because if you tinker with the fundamental engine of life, things can and probably will go horribly wrong. The massive risk here is that unlocking infinite cell division is precisely the mechanism of cancer. Cancer cells actively keep their telomeres long so they can endlessly multiply. By taking the brakes off our normal cells to stop aging, we might accidentally engineer a highly aggressive supercancer, a disease that spreads infinitely and rapidly, which absolutely no medicine could ever stop. And then, oh boy, there is the risk of cellular confusion. When we forcefully reprogram adult cells to act young again, they can get violently confused about their job description. And this can lead to teratomas. These are grotesque, bizarre tumors where confused cells just start following the wrong blueprint. You could literally have a scenario where cells suddenly start growing fully formed teeth, clumps of hair, or even an eye, just randomly attached to your kidney or your liver. Now, if you think that sounds like some impossible nightmare, consider this horrifying real-life case. A woman in Los Angeles paid thousands of dollars to inject stem cells around her eyes as a cosmetic treatment to stop wrinkles. But as we know, biology is unpredictable. The stem cells got confused in their new environment and actually started forming bone. She eventually had to have surgery to physically extract sharp bone fragments that were clicking around inside her eyelids. Which kind of brings our whole narrative full circle. Remember Henrietta Lacks, whose cells kicked off this entire scientific revolution? The medical industry used her stolen biology to create the polio vaccine, to understand viruses, and to pioneer gene editing. Pharmaceutical companies made billions upon billions of dollars. Yet Henrietta Lacks' family was left in the dark for decades and was never compensated. It's a pretty stark reminder of how the medical industry has historically operated when massive profits are on the line. And we need to be crystal clear about the sobering reality here. When these billionaire-funded labs finally crack the code to extending human life, they aren't going to just hand it out as charity. These therapies will likely cost millions of dollars per person. The inevitable result isn't some global utopia. It's a permanent biological division of humanity. We're looking at a world split squarely into the immortal ultra-rich and the naturally dying poor. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. The science we've looked at today proves that overcoming biological aging is transitioning from a myth into a very plausible reality. But as we stand on the brink of conquering humanity's oldest enemy, we are forced to ask, if science in the hands of the elite finally cures death, who will actually be allowed to live forever? Thanks for hanging out with me today, and stay curious.